Welcome to the Leadmore podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. The Leadmore podcast is the show where we sit down and learn from leaders of today to help inspire and create more leaders for tomorrow. Because I believe the world needs more leaders, and why can't you be the next one? In episode 22, we sat down with my friend, Kendra Gottsleben. Kendra is an incredible person. So we sat down and talked about what's it like to be born with a disability and to have people often doubt you and kind of question what you're capable of. We segued into talking about Kendra's phenomenal outlook on life. She embodies the phrase, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And she really, as a founder of Lemonly, I love that. We talked about that. And then lastly, she shared some tips on how leaders can be more accessible to topics like disabilities and to more open to learning around these topics and how to be more aware. Kendra's always been a person that I go to for some of those challenges and some of those questions when I'm not really sure, and she's always been so open to discussion. So we sat down and talked about all those things. I think you're going to learn from her, and I know you'll be inspired by her. So let's give a listen to episode 22 with Kendra Gottsleben. All right, welcome to another episode of the Leadmore podcast. I'm here with my friend Kendra. How are you doing today, Kendra?
I'm doing good, and I'm excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you. So let's start at the beginning, because I know that I know some of your story. For me, we've had coffee and we've talked. We have mutual friends, but I don't know the whole story. So you were born in Vermilion. You grew up there, right?
Yes, actually, I was born up here in Sioux Valley, like in Sioux Falls. But then, yes, grew up and raised in Vermilion, South Dakota. So graduated and went to elementary school and all that jazz. So I'm kind of a yote,
But went to Augustana here in Sioux Falls, right?
Correct. Yep. So I'm a yote and a Viking.
There you go. Perfect. All right. Well, and tell me, I think we should just get right to it. So tell me a little bit about the condition that you were born with.
Okay. So I have a rare disease called, broad name is mucopolysaccharidosis type 6. And then the type 6 name is Martolome. Mm-hmm. And basically what that is I am missing an enzyme that is needed to cleanse my cells. So without that enzyme, my connective tissue is stiff. It builds up in my eyes, heart, other vital organs, and I am 3 feet tall. Not everyone with this condition is short, but it is, if you look at a lot of individuals with, and then the acronym is MPS 6, if you would look at a lot of us, we are shorter.
Okay.
So that did affect my height.
Okay. And the one question I wanted to ask you related to that, I mean, there's several, but the first one was, did your parents know that this was going to be a condition you're going to have, or was it something that happened at birth?
So no, when I was born, I was born 9 pounds, 21 and a half inches long. So like nothing at birth that they think there was going to be any future visiting hospitals and everything. But sure. I was diagnosed at 4, and how that went about was at about 13 months, they noticed I had, it's called a kyphosis. 30 years ago, they didn't know, but that is a sign of MPS. So at 13 months, they went in and tried to fix the kyphosis. So after that, because it was an orthopedic surgeon up here, so like anything, when you have something done, you keep coming back for routine visits and checkups. And my mom was noticing as I was learning to walk and everything that I kind of had bent knees. My hands were kind of short and kind of chubby. I didn't, I would get out of breath. It was just things that she noticed that like most kids don't do. And so she kept bringing it up, and the doctor was like, "Oh, it's fine. All kids walk like that." And my mom's like, No, I'm in elementary.
Sure.
That's not how. I'm an elementary principal. I see kids all day. They don't really. And so after, I would say, a couple times of just keep going back and forth, he finally said, "Why don't you do a genetic test?" So then we met with the genetic test doctor, and before we even actually did it, she looked at me and said, "Oh, I think she has some type of MPS." Like, she just kind of knew. But she told my parents, before they sent the test away to be tested, that they thought, she was pretty sure that I had an MPS, one of the MPS types, that I would probably die by the age of 10. So my parents lived with that for about a month.
Wow.
And I was 4, so my mom would look at me like, "Oh, I just have not many more years," But she just had a hard time because she's talking, she's doing everything, like how. But then when it came back, it was actually that I had MPS 6, and some of the other MPSs do. They're all different. 4 and 6 don't really affect the cognitive ability. It's just more of the body. So I always say, if you have to have an MPS, it's good to have MPS 6.
Well, we'll get to your outlook on life because I think that's related. What's the typical for someone with 6? What's the typical life expectancy for something like that?
There really isn't like an actual number or anything. It's just when you put like someone who might, with me, like if you have pneumonia, because we have some lung issues, and then you have heart issues. So it's kind of just putting all those issues together that ultimately that's kind of how it affects. It just determines, like, if you get pneumonia, heart issues, it's just kind of all that, everything that works together or doesn't work together.
So now if a child was born today, is it something that they would detect almost?
Yeah, so they would do, they're still trying to get it into the newborn screening part of that, but if there's like things that they kind of notice, because some babies, like unlike me, when I was born, I was a pretty good sized baby, so there wasn't any indication that there was anything. That if there's babies that they see that there might be something, or even like a 9-month or whatever, they can, if they do a genetic test and they've come back with MPS, they can get on the weekly enzyme replacement for therapy that I've been doing for close to 20 years.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, so the treatment is not a cure.
Yep.
But it's a treatment, and what it does, it slows down the progress. It doesn't stop it, and it can't go in. So, like, as me being a sophomore in high school, it can't go in and like get rid of and take care of what's already been done. But yeah, for these little kiddos that get diagnosed at a young age, they can be on it right away.
Well, good for you for being one of the first to dive into that. And I want to talk to more about what you do today. Tell me one thing. I think that a lot of leaders have some kind of crossroads or point in their life where someone told them, like, you can't do that. You're not going to be able to achieve that. Like, you didn't come from the right background. You don't have the right skills, and they persevere and they figure it out. I'm guessing you probably had a few moments like that in your life where people told you, you can't do that. You won't be able to do that. What are some of the things that you remember setting your mind to that you proved people wrong?
So I have been pretty lucky that I haven't had as many as one might think. But yes, I definitely have had some. My first one that I really remember is when I was in high school and you're starting to think about college and doing all those wonderful tests and everything. I wanted to take an AP class, and to do the AP class, you had to have go into a counselor, and they had to like sign off, a guidance counselor. And some of the requirements were you had to have a certain GPA, and then you had to have another teacher like in the school say, yeah, I think the student will be more than qualified to take an AP class. So when I went in, the counselor I wanted to talk to was busy, obviously for a reason, because everybody liked that counselor. So I went to the next counselor, and so I gave her my paperwork, and I said, I want to take AP Lit, American history and everything. And she looked at me and she said, well, you know that most kids that are taking that class are planning on going to college.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at her and I was like, okay, that's my plan too. Like, I hadn't, she's like, well, you have to have a certain GPA and you have to have a teacher sign off on it. So you have to go through that. And I said, I have a 3.5 GPA, which was more than qualified me to take it. And I said the teacher's name. I said he signed off on it and said I'm more than qualified to do it. And I don't think she didn't really say anything. She was just kind of like, oh, okay. And at that point, like, I didn't take it like to heart. I was just kind of like, well, that's weird. Like, why would you? But then as the day went on, I was like, so does she not think I'm college material? Like, then I started like the whole process and everything. And I remember when my mom picked me up, from school that day, I was like crying, and she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, it's finally happened. Somebody has like bullied her or like something, and then I told her, and I just said, I had a counselor say that I'm basically not college material, and
that was already in your plans and in your sights.
Yeah, I think the way I was raised was you go to elementary school, you go to middle school, you go to high school, you go to college, you get a job. Like, it was just, that's the next step. Like,
and nothing ever changed because of your condition. That was something you were going to do, and your parents made that a priority.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't like you have to, but it was just kind of like, well, why wouldn't I?
Good for you.
So that was, that time. And then, I had a great experience and I learned a lot in college, but I did run into a couple professors that basically all the stories that when I've run into something like that, I believe what's happened is they look at my size and they judge me. You know how they say, don't judge a book by the cover. But I think that's kind of when I put them all together. I think that's what's happened, that it's like, she's really short. Like, how would she be able to do that? Why would she do that? And
well, I remember we initially crossed paths because you're active on social media, you work in marketing and communications. We had mutual people that we knew. And I remember the first time we had coffee because I remember one of the first things you said to me was like, I love lemons, and I love the phrase, like, lemons to lemonade is like my motto. And if you go to your website, that's very clear. It's right there at the homepage. And I think we all could use a little bit more positivity, especially in 2020. So tell me a little bit about what that phrase, lemons to lemonade, means to you, Kendra.
Well, not until like my college years did I really start like professing that, but I just remember always as a little kid, I was always like, life is hard, but you got to keep pushing forward. And then it always came back to like, when life hands you lemons, make lemonade. And who doesn't like a bright yellow anything? I mean, it's just fun and they're happy.
Got my water bottle here, right? Bright lemon.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a lot of it. I've always liked bright colors and being cheerful. And so I've always felt close to that phrase because it is true. Like, everybody in this world, doesn't matter if you have a disability, a rare disease, or anything, that we have obstacles that we have to get through. Like, there could be family issues, there could be work issues, there's we don't get out of this life scot-free from anything. And I feel like the way when life hands you lemons make lemonade is a more fun way to look at
Yeah.
those obstacles that we have to go through.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I think when someone, when you can believe that so intently, it makes some other folks who maybe are complaining about, oh, I have an old version of an iPhone, or oh, somebody cut me off in traffic, or oh, the weather is crappy. It's like, wait a minute. Like, Kendra's the most positive person out there. She's dealing with way more than your old iPhone, right? Like, I just think the perspective that you can gain from somebody having that positivity, it's really infectious.
Yeah, and I hope that that's the message that comes off with me. But I definitely, when you asked me to be on this podcast, it was like leadership. And when I go back to like when I was in high school, I got a leadership award, and I've always been like, I'm not really a leader. I'm just kind of doing my thing. But as I've gotten to be 35 and you start looking around, it's like, when I was in high school, I was always thinking like a leader is like a political person and
Sure.
going out there and getting things done and blah, 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 like advocacy, the word advocacy.
Yes.
As a little kid, I always thought like you're up at the legislature and you're advocating and you're doing all that. But I feel like, and maybe it was more like that when we were younger, I don't know, but I feel like nowadays terms are more broad. Leadership isn't just the term that leadership you think it is. And advocacy isn't just being at the Capitol trying to get laws passed and all this stuff. It's also advocating in simple ways of, I really don't, because there's some people that don't feel comfortable because they don't want to make a big fuss.
Yep.
But like, let's say you're at a restaurant and you're in an area that you're not comfortable with or something, you advocate saying, hey, could we move over here? I think those are the things that I feel like, and maybe it's just me, but I feel like there's more ways to do things than what we grew up thinking.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I could stop the podcast now because you said what I believe. I see you as a leader, and I think it doesn't always have to look the same way as someone else, or you don't have to have that title or have that role or big salary or CEO title. Like, I see you as a leader, and you do things that leaders need to do, which is advocate for people and speak up. And so let's talk about that a little bit. So you work in your field, I suppose, in your area of expertise for the Center of Disabilities in Marketing and Communication. Tell us about the work, because I also want to get into some of the things you've done, on your own. You've written 2 books, a children's book, and then a book about your story. How have you been an advocate for folks with disabilities?
I've actually written 3 books.
3 books, sorry. My research is out of date.
But so what I've been blessed with is, so I work at the Center for Disabilities, like you mentioned, and even though I'm behind, the screen, the computer, and I don't have as much interaction with maybe the families and healthcare professionals and everything that we help with, because what we do at the center is we are helping, like, our audience is very broad. We work with educators, we work with parents, we work with individuals with disabilities that is also known as like self-advocates. We work with, healthcare professionals like med students, and just all that kind of compasses. And so we're helping them learn more about best practices with individuals with a disability, more advocacy for people with disabilities, so it kind of all goes into one. And so for me, after graduating from college, I was sociology, psychology, I didn't know. I'm like, I don't know, I just want to help people.
Yeah.
So I lucked out and started at the center, and gradually I kind of created my own position back. I've been there for 10 years.
Wow.
And that was before Facebook was like hardcore Facebook and Twitter was Twitter. I mean, before social media really took the business approach. And so when I was there, I just kind of said, have you ever thought of a Facebook page?
Yep.
And a Twitter account? And I said, we're a nonprofit, so we don't have oodles and oodles of funds to get the word out.
Yeah.
And at that time, she was like, no. The executive director, Dr. Judy Struck, and she's like, if you want to create it, sure.
Yeah, go for it.
So from that point on, it was just kind of, I created that, and then I got more into, after some of the other people above me, like supervisors in the marketing had left, I kind of moved more into that. And it's funny though, because I don't have a background. That's not my degree in, marketing and everything. But especially in this world, I am a person with a disability. So I'm able to wear that hat and be like, what's the information that people with a disability want to know about, or parents or family members or siblings, and what are we doing that needs to get out there?
Yep.
And so what's the other cool part of it is, since we're housed in the School of Medicine, the University of South Dakota Sanford School of Medicine, I do get fun opportunities to share my perspective of being a person with a disability and a rare disease with med students, like first-year med students.
Sure.
We talk about disability etiquette, and I'm a rarity because if you put it into numbers, there's 1 in 250,000 individuals have what I have. So
Wow.
like 100 in the United States.
Wow.
So when I talk to the med students, I always give them a bad time. I'm like, you're probably never going to see another one of us, me. I was like, here I am. Then they always say, yeah, we learned about you, but it was like one sentence. And I was like, yeah.
Sure, a little footnote in the textbook.
Yeah, I was like, but here I am. And so I get those fun opportunities to share what it's like to have a disability, rare disease, and how they can make those tough conversations or those medical appointments easier for them, but also easier for the patients, they're working with.
Yeah, I mean, I think for those students, so much of being a great doctor isn't just knowing the textbook, but also like the empathy and the communication and how to relate to someone like yourself. And I can't, lessons from you versus what a professor at the front of the room has to be so much more tangible and valuable.
Well, and that's what I remember back, like when I was in school, it's like, when we were in school, it's like reading it from the book. I've never been a person that's been able to read it and like remember it. I need to see it, hear it, and like it's a real person talking about a real experience.
Sure. Yeah.
Kind of sticks with you a little bit more.
Absolutely. You may don't even remember this, but another way you've been an advocate, I remember you sent me a DM on Twitter one time about accessibility with design, and so we work in communications and design at Lemonly, but we need to think about the colors that we use, the colors that the text is on, the ability, the legibility of our designs. And that was so helpful, just to build that understanding as well. So you've been an advocate that way too.
Well, and that's kind of what's been fun in the recent years. Some of the things that I've been able to do outside of work, there's called Runway of Dreams, which is a foundation that's mission is to help the clothing world, in the fashion world, understand people with a disability and with clothing. But then it takes another step forward. It's like the imagery that we see, the icons, the commercials, the everything. We don't see models, or we don't see as much people with disabilities in the mainstream media. And so that's another thing that I've really been into trying to help the concept. And I really believe it's not that everybody's ignoring it, but there's some people that have just never looked at it, or it's like, oh, like they just didn't know because that's not their world.
Sure. I'm trying to find out where it was now. So I'm looking, was it maybe your Twitter account? I believe, yes, on your Twitter account, you have author, advocate, and fashionista. So I was going to ask you about that. So tell me.
Well, I've always grown up, like my grandma sewed a lot for me for a lot of my clothes as a kid because
sure.
it was hard. Like I did a lot of elastic and everything. Stiff clothes were just challenging. But I'd always help my grandma, like she would take out the patterns and then she had like oodles and oodles of patterns. So I'd pick it out and I'd be like, I want this style of a top with this skirt or this pants. And then we would pick out the fabric and then she would make it. So I've always kind of liked that. And my mom and her sisters love shopping. And I'm a girl, so a girly girl, so I like shopping too. But I not until this last 2014 and everything did that all kind of come together as like with people with disabilities. It's not just me that has issues with clothing and, you know, because I'm short too. Trying to be like when I got my first job, it was like, how do I trust the age that I am, but I shop where your daughters shop, you know, like in the little section.
Yep.
So it's kind of been fun too, because trying to find, you know, the hunt a little bit of like, oh, this looks like age appropriate. But so on social media, I had found back in like 2015-ish, there was a Facebook page called Runway of Dreams, and it wasn't doing a ton, but I like messaged her and was like, oh, what is this concept? It's interesting. And so I contacted Mindy Shire, and we kind of created a good connection, and she was working on, you know, trying to get more businesses and companies seeing the light of adapted fashion, and their first adapted fashion show was 2016, and I had been helping her a little bit with social media because she was like, I remember the first message she had sent me, she was like, hey, you're really good at this like social media thing. would you help me? And I was like, yeah, I can help you. But I got the great honor that like from a girl, South Dakota girl, small town, you know, I got to be in their first fashion show in New York City, and I wore adapted Tommy Hilfiger. So I'm like, okay, never did I see my life go in that direction. You know,
that's awesome.
It's again with the disability that for me, some people it's hard to accept the disability or the rare disease. And I learned at a young age that you've got to accept it or you're not going to, you know, move on or reach the dreams or reach the things that you want. And that's one of the things I really liked when talking to young adults or young kids about a rare disease or disability is the sooner you learn your strengths and your weaknesses and what makes you, the more productive or the more successful you'll have in life. But in reality, that's not specific to just people with disabilities or rare diseases. We all, as a society, the sooner we learn what makes us tick, then the better we're going to be in whatever we want to do.
And accept it and embrace it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's so good, Kendra. That's good. It's making that lemonade. So let's talk about, you mentioned the runway opportunity. I know you've given a TED Talk. I'm sure you've had, by putting yourself out there, raising your hand, being an advocate, you've had some cool opportunities. What's something that maybe I don't know about that you've gotten to do?
When I take a step back is the parents of individuals that have, like little kids that have MPS 6, I remember when my first book was out, like I had started my Facebook page and everything, and I got a message from a dad in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And he had said, "We just bought your book because our daughter was diagnosed," and he said she was diagnosed around the same age, and we're hoping that what you wrote or everything that we can gain some insight in how we should raise our daughter, and giving me hope and that there is a future, and seeing that. So things like that, like I didn't go out to make happen, but it's been fun seeing how that.
So before we conclude with some kind of rapid fire about leadership, one question I wanted to ask you: if a leader is listening to this show and maybe they lead a business, they lead a team, an organization, a classroom, and they're trying to understand how to be more aware, how to empathize, how to be more accessible to folks with disabilities and whatever their particular lens is, what's sort of like a best practices, or like where do we start, resources that you recommend so that we can all be, you've been a good like advocate for me and teaching me over the years, but what would you say to folks listening to this show?
Well, for just like not having to like dig up resources at first, is just being a good listener and making it definitely comfortable for people to come and talk to you about something that they might want to talk about, like if they have a surgery coming up, things like that, that sometimes I don't think leaders realize is when you're an open person and just have empathy, you get so much from it. But so locally, us as the Center for Disabilities is a good resource. We have we're part of it's called a network, and that would be like they have really good resources on their website, which is the acronym is AUCD, but it's the Association of Universities Excellence. Okay, I kind of butchered that. But if you look at the UCD, but they have all the states.
Okay.
So we would have, there's 50 of us, so we're called the Center for Disabilities, but then Iowa has one.
Sure.
All of them kind of have something like us where we would be able for people to connect with. South Dakota Parent Connection for families, for leaders in schools and stuff. And just reaching out to local people that are in their area, just having conversations, I think real experiences like you were mentioning is definitely key. One of the things is like having someone who actually walks the walk or talks the talk do it is different than someone who doesn't have isn't in a wheelchair come to a presentation on what it's like to be. So.
Well, I think in that same way that a leader can be open and accessible, I feel like you've been that way where you've always been like, yeah, ask me questions, or like,
definitely
reach out. Like there isn't any dumb questions. And I always think that's so powerful.
I am always say that I'm an open book. There are times where like simple, like in the mall where you can tell moms or dads are embarrassed because their kid is staring, and I don't think they realize that when you drag the kid away because you're embarrassed that they said something that you didn't think that was appropriate, or there's definitely kids that are doing it to kind of be naughty, but that's an opportunity for that kid to learn the difference. Like when you're pulling the kid away and you're not really answering the question, you're giving them this perception of like, oh, I shouldn't associate with that, or I shouldn't have asked why those person's legs don't work.
Sure.
It's a simple question. Why don't your legs work, or why are you in a chair?
Yeah.
It's an opportune time for them to learn that not everybody, uses their legs.
Yeah, that's a great teaching moment. Yeah, you don't want to miss out on that. Yeah. Well, and good on you for being open to that, to give people those moments, right? And not, yeah, that's great. All right, well, let's finish here with, I want to get to know a few things more about you. So I don't know if you're a big reader. I mean, you must be if you write books, but what are you reading right now, or what's a book you recommend to folks to read?
I'm a person, and I'm not reading anything right now, but I'm a person that likes to read like real life. So I read like what's blanking me, but Fox, who has Parkinson's. Why am I?
Oh, Michael Fox.
Yeah, like I like books like that where they're really real stories, or kind of like what going through issues, and but it's not fake.
Sure.
So yeah, I should be a better reader than I am, but
Well, you're too busy writing all your books. I've been asking everyone this because I think we all could use a little bit more of it, but 2020 has been pretty stressful. So how do you de-stress? How do you unplug when you need a break?
for me, especially with some of the things that I have had to personally work through with recently, recovering from open heart surgery and stuff, writing is how I kind of de-stress. I turn music on really loud and I can write my feelings or my thoughts, and I like being creative, so just trying to do things with photos, helping others if I can, like with through answering questions with Instagram. But I'd say writing is really what kind of helps me get through a lot of it.
That's great. I have some guesses of how you might answer this, but what is your superpower? So we define that as the one thing you do better than anyone else.
Well, I feel like empathy. I feel like I'm able to, even though I may not walk in the same shoes, literally, or roll with someone else's, I feel like I have a good knack of kind of understanding, not like verbatim where they're coming from, but I'm a good listener, and I'm really good at like trying to be there for someone.
That's great. I could see that totally too. I was thinking maybe you were going to go positivity, but empathy.
I mean, empathy, positivity, they're kind of
They are similar, yeah. And lastly, who are, whether it be people you don't know that you've read about, or people you know that have impacted your life, the leaders, the mentors, the people that have shaped who you are?
And that's a tough question because I've had a lot.
I'm sure.
A lot of my, teachers in high school, like a couple professors in college, but also like Jolene Letcher. She's helped me. I mean, she helped me meet Hugh Weber, who then I got on, did the TED Talk, and she, so there's been a lot of people that have come across. I would say you.
Oh,
Because,
very kind.
no, but really because like I followed you from Nine Clouds to your innovation, the things that you are always challenging yourself. I want to be more like that. So it's for me, it's people being innovative and always trying to do something better, and change the world.
That's great. I feel like we should end on those words, because those are powerful words that we all could take. And I want to thank you for, like I said, always being an advocate for everyone else, but also sort of a coach and a teacher to me. So thank you for being here on the show, and thanks for your time, Kendra.
Yeah, thank you. And it's been an honor chatting with you.
All right, that is episode 22 of the Leadmore podcast. Again, I'm your host, John T. Meyer. You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube at John T. Meyer. Find more episodes of the Leadmore podcast wherever you listen to podcasts on your app, or you can go directly to leadmorepodcast.com. If you want more great content around leadership and community to support you on your journey, join the Leadmore community, and that's at leadmorecommunity.com. Thanks again. We'll be back next week on Thursday when we drop a new episode. Until then, take care.